What Happens in Carolina, written by Karen Gray, performed by Bradley Ford and Carly Robbins. Chapter 1. Culver City, California, July 20th, 1998. High, 74 degrees Fahrenheit. Low, 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Precipitation, 0%. Wind speed, 10 miles per hour. Tina. As I pull up to the booth guarding the entrance of the BW television studio, my heart's in my throat and my eyes threaten to leak. This isn't just hyperbole. I feel things hard. Hell, half the time I experience other people's emotions more than they do. Today, I make the Herculean effort to stay above the swell, because if I'm drowning in tears of joy/pride/terror, I won't be able to park my car, let alone actually do the job that I've somehow landed. I still can't believe this is actually happening. When I studied creative writing at Barnard, my parents made me do a minor in education, so I'd have something to fall back on. However, instead of teaching grammar to kids after college, I found a job writing grants at a New York nonprofit. From there, a series of fortunate events leapfrogged me to my new position as a writer on an honest-to-God television show. My parents are still totally freaking out that I've moved across the country to grab the opportunity, but for some perspective, they were upset when I moved from New Jersey to Manhattan. Of course, I have to make it onto the lot to start the job that is looking increasingly unlikely. As the gatekeeper returns my ID with a frown and asks me to pull over to the side to let the cars behind me go through, I wonder if I dreamed the phone call in which, based solely the spec scripts I mailed the show's creator, he said he'd be jazzed to add a fresh young voice to the team. Perhaps the 12 phone calls I heard his mother, aka my former boss, make to him only had him caving in the moment he's now realized what a dumb idea it is to bring in someone so fresh and young that she had to check a book out of the library to figure out what a spec script even was. Just as I decide to save myself the humiliation of being fired before I can start, by turning my car around and crawling back to the little apartment I can no longer pay for, the grumpy attendant reappears, hands me a temporary parking pass and a highlighted map, and waves me through. Dread takes a backseat to awe as I drive down the streets of the studio lot. It's exactly like what you'd imagine. Facades of buildings line streets that could stand in for a small town or a New York street circa 1900. One of the 3D buildings looks exactly like Terra in Gone with the Wind. Not so many people saunter about in outrageous costumes like you see in movies about making movies, though. Instead, people whiz by in golf carts or on bikes, many of them barking orders on cellular phones. When I finally find the administration building, I'm slightly disappointed. A flat-fronted brick building, it could be a dentist's or a CPA's office in my hometown. Inside, the straight-out-of-central casting blonde receptionist gets mad at me when she can't find me in her system. Several sighs and eye rolls and mutters and apologies from me later. She locates my name in one of the many printouts on her desk. By the time she hands me a temporary ID and a stack of paperwork, I'm exhausted. But I do have a destination. But when I try to enter my assigned office, the door smacks into some sort of barricade. Sticking my head through the opening, I find a desk blocking the way and a man hunched over a legal pad. I clear my throat. When he still doesn't acknowledge my presence, I say, "Excuse me?" He startles, his hair sticking up every which way, like a baby bird with thick Clark Kent black glasses. If Clark Kent wore the 90s grunge uniform of flannel shirt over faded graphic t-shirt, that is. I stop myself from picturing a Superman body underneath it all. No need to picture my coworkers in spandex. He just blinks at me without saying anything, so I fill the air myself. Sorry to interrupt. I was told this was my office? Noting that I've already done 3 things my mentor back in New York forbid, using or apologizing for my existence, and letting statements go up at the end like they're questions. I stop, take a breath, and start over. This is my office. He blinks slowly and points. After I squeeze through the excuse for a doorway, I'm able to see that his desk has a twin facing it. Oh, well, okay. I guess this is our office. His response is to sink further down into his chair, prop his elbow on the desk, hunch over, and resume writing. Or doodling. Maybe both. It's hard to tell because his broad back makes a pretty good shield. The too big for the space desks are pushed up against each other and the opposite wall, leaving only a 6-inch gap on one side. To get to my desk, I'll have to close the door and then somehow squeeze by. Just getting in the door is awkward. Accessing my chair will require gymnastics. Going up on my tippy toes and leaning forward until my butt is wedged between the desk's rim and the wainscoting rail behind me, I squeeze along the crevasse until I get to the 3-by-5-foot rectangle where a chair awaits with my name on it. Not literally like you see in movies about making movies. This is just a regular old office chair that I assume is for me. Grateful to have finally arrived, already dreading having to repeat the process, I drop my bag on the desk and flop into the chair, only to have it tip back so fast that my skull smacks into the wall and my glasses fall off my face and into my lap. Clark Kent across the way is definitely not a superhero in disguise. He doesn't try to save me from the evil chair. He barely glances up. Instead of even a look of concern from him, I'm faced with glares from a row of tiny action figures that line the edge of his desk. Undeterred, unwilling to let neither a lost parking pass, nor improperly filed paperwork, nor a too-small-to-share office, nor a malevolent chair, nor armed toys keep me from my dreams, I take a cleansing breath and unpack my briefcase. After spending a ridiculous amount of time organizing my desk, like it's the first day of school and I've got all my supplies but no idea what we're supposed to do with them, I'm about to ask the guy if he knows where the break room is. I'd kill for another cup of coffee. Or anything about what the heck we're doing here, when the door flies open and smacks into the desk, making me yelp. Loudly. Clark Kent's head snaps up like he forgot I was here. Then, a man with gelled-up Luke Perry hair sticks his head in the door. He looks back and forth between Clark and me, and then, perhaps deciding that I am the more obvious source of the high-pitched yelp, asks, "Are you all right, honey?" I do manage to squelch the impulse to tell him I'm not his honey, but I can't do the same for the frustration coloring my tone when I ask, "Is this your office, too?" He throws his head back and barks out a series of laughs. When he's finished, he sighs. Ah, baby writers. Growing like tribbles around here. Wearing a bowling shirt that he must have stolen from his grandpa, he can't be too much older than me or Clark Kent over there, but before I can manage a comeback, he snaps his fingers at us. Come on, you two. I'm here to give you the orientation." Somehow I managed to negotiate the edge of the desk again without getting a run in my hose on the dismount. The men usher me out first, but since I don't know which direction we're going, I hover by the wall while they follow. "This way," Snappy calls, stalking down the hall. Before Clark can gesture, "After you," again, I note that his shoulders are even broader than I'd thought, though his baggy Ren and Stimpy shirt doesn't give too many hints as to the rest of his physique. Not that I care. At this point, I don't even want to know their names. I'm happy with the ones I've given them.
George. Bowling shirt man leads vintage dress girl down the hall. I follow, waiting for a hole to open up and swallow me. Not that there's an earthquake happening. Unfortunately, I know exactly what that feels like, having moved to LA just days before the big one in '94. No, this gaping hole is just my hyper-imagination wondering how the hell I got here. I mean, I know how I got here. From my place in the upper reaches of Van Nuys, I drove my beater down the 405 for what seemed like hours. Even though it's a major freeway, sometimes the traffic was at a complete standstill. Commuters in cars around me were more prepared. People ate breakfast, read the paper, applied makeup. I think one guy was even shining his shoes. Eventually, I made it to the 10, took it to Robertson, and then, Thomas Guide map next to me for reference, navigated to the Culver City studio where I was handed a parking pass. Once I'd located the writer's building, I was directed to an office on the 5th floor, where I waited for what felt like hours, doodling until Vintage Dress Girl showed up. And the room went from black and white to color. Bowling Shirt whirls to face us, startling me back to the present. Like a steward on an airplane, his tone robotic, he points with arms in parallel, hands flat. Behind you, the emergency exit should you decide that this trip is not for you. To your left, the kitchen, fuel up as needed. To your right, the storyroom. Enter at your own risk. He smooths his hair, even though it looks like it wouldn't dare move, before checking a fancy watch. That's it. Meeting in 10. We'll break you in while we break story. With one finger, he points at his chest. I'm Bryce. Welcome to Lawson's Reach. Lawson's Reach. All I know about this TV show I'm apparently writing for is that it's a new live-action series about teenagers who live at the beach. I got my first few writing jobs on animated series without having an agent. But after my most recent show got canceled, a buddy convinced me to sign on with one. Even though I've been obsessed with cartoons my entire life, even though that's all I've ever written, the agent would only submit me for what he called real TV. Steamrolling over my objections, he just went on and on about how it was a seller's market for hot new talent right now, and how he was so psyched about my distinctive voice and killer punch-up. Since I had no idea what he was talking about, it was tough to catch his enthusiasm. But once I learned how much I could make writing for primetime TV, I took a fresh look at my garage apartment. We're not talking about a space above a garage, you understand. This so-called conversion came complete with oil stains on the concrete floor. So, after speed dating my way through weeks of pitching interviews, I was pretty psyched when I got a meet and greet with the showrunner of none other than Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Unfortunately, the guy spent more time talking on the phone than he did to me, and there were at least 100 spec scripts piled on his desk with the names of other writers sharpied onto their spines. I guess I shouldn't be too surprised that I didn't make the cut. I did get a job offer the next day, but it wasn't for Buffy. My agent was over the moon, though, since Lawson's Reach was the hottest buzz of any new show for the '98 fall season. With no other choices, I took it. But all I can imagine now are the 100 ways I could fuck this up.
Tina. Despite the lack of space, I can't stop pacing behind my desk after we return from the story meeting. Well, that was embarrassing. Do you think they do that to every new writer? I mean, my school didn't have sororities or fraternities, but that felt like hazing. I mean, this is a work environment. Even though we're creative types, I'm used to being treated like a professional, so sue me if I bought it. After that first hour on the job, I'm too full of too many feelings to stop talking either. What I thought was a dream come true might actually be a nightmare. I mean, it's as plausible as anything else around here that the rest of the writing staff are Quakers who pray together before working. Everything I know about how a TV show gets written comes from watching reruns of Dick Van Dyke. How was I to know it was all a prank? Though with the success of the show down the hall, I guess it'd be more believable that they'd be a coven of vampires. No, that's witches. What the heck do you call a gathering of vampires? Now that's going to bother me all day. Something about Clark, or George, I should say, revs up my motor mouth. The only words he uttered during that disastrous meeting were his name, and all I got was his first name. He swallowed his last name, slouching down so far in his chair as he said it that he could be 5'2" like me, even though I know from walking down the hall next to him he's got to be over 6 feet tall. I flop into my chair, more carefully this time, adjust my glasses, and start the list I'm supposed to be making of story ideas. I guess I'm definitely not in Kansas anymore. This gets his attention. You're from Kansas? The look of horror on his face, in addition to the fact that I am so not from Kansas, has a regretfully unladylike snort bark coming out of my face. Ah, no! I'm from New York. Technically, it's New Jersey, but since I worked in Manhattan for the past 2 years and went to school in the borough's upper reaches, I consider myself a New York girl. No one else need be the wiser. Oh, yeah, got it. And he's back to doodling. That was a Wizard of Oz reference, I add unnecessarily, speaking to the top of his skull. I consider asking where he's from, just to see if I can get him to answer a direct question and maybe get around to figuring out why Kansas is such a hot-button topic for him, but decide to organize my notes instead. Pulling note cards and colored markers from the little nests I created in my desk drawer, I line them up next to my copy of the show Bible. Along with character descriptions and photos of the cast, it includes lists of products that we're encouraged to feature as much as possible. Product placement is what they call it. Pretty sneaky advertising is what I'd call it. I don't think Roger truly loved every idea, even though he kept yelling that he did. I mean, when we left, what did he say? I ask rhetorically, knowing there will be no response from my office mate. Remember, people, it's not Shakespeare, it's TV. Personally, I think Mr. Shakespeare would have written some very interesting teleplays. Though what he would have done with, let's take the Breakfast Club and crank it up to 11, I have no idea. I truly have no idea how to take the list I carefully transcribed from the board and turn it into a 50-page, 4-act script. I left my screenwriting manual at home, so I do what I would to sketch out a short story, jotting down ideas on the note cards with my own little system. Pink for character details, blue for anything emotional, green for plot points, and red for conflict. Just as I'm getting into my groove, the door flies open and crashes into my desk, a yelp flies out of my mouth, and my note cards fly into the air like confetti at the Macy's Thanksgiving parade. Bryce sticks his head in the door. Is that going to happen every time, darlin'? Before I can answer or tell him to please call me by my name instead of a demeaning diminutive, he strides in. Of course, he doesn't get far before he runs into a wall. Spinning, he poses, leaning against the whiteboard and crossing his legs just so. All right, bunnies, let's hear your origin stories. Before I can give him the carefully prepared speech about how I'm a novelist at heart, but I was encouraged by a mentor to explore writing for television to stretch my wings, Bryce holds up a stop sign hand. Oh, wait. I remember now. His smile is devilish as he taps his chin slowly. You're the one who worked for Sheldon's mommy. I open my mouth to protest, but since he's right, I close it again. He crosses to pointedly look out into the hall before closing the door and leaning against it. Did you sleep with him? George's head snaps up. Before I can sputter out a protest, Bryce shrugs. Sweetie, you wouldn't be the first to get ahead using your... He pauses to brow waggle. Feminine wiles? I'm just gathering intel, hoping that man plays for my team, if you know what I mean. A softball team lineup flashes into my mind momentarily, but then a different picture replaces it that has me blushing. I try to take in a breath to answer, but I end up choking instead. After taking a sip of my now cold coffee, I force words out of my mouth. I don't know anything about his, team building. I mean, team choices or whatever. But I didn't sleep with anybody. My face is aflame and I'm sweating in all the places. But because I'm me, I just push my glasses back up the bridge of my nose and keep talking. I mean, I sleep with people all the time, just not at work, because that would be, I don't want to say wrong, because maybe that's a thing the not-so-Quaker group here does. Sleep with each other, that is. Anyway, I am heterosexual and I date men, but I believe I am here based on the strength of the spec scripts I wrote, as well as the glowing recommendation I earned after working as a grant writer for Sheldon's for Mrs. Winthrop at Charity Chic in New York. The two men just stare at me for a few beats, but there's no way I'm going to look away first. Finally, Bryce nods slowly and turns his laser focus on George. "And you, my pretty?" Behind his thick glasses, George blinks as slowly as the pet lizard my brother had growing up, after what feels like an hour, during which Bryce leans farther and farther in his direction. He finally mumbles, "I was a staff writer on, The Incredible Hulk and the Mighty Ducks." When Bryce's brows come together in confusion, I share. Since the Hulk was on TV when we were all kids, George adds, "The animated series, not the live-action versions." Bryce straightens and claps his hands merrily. "And we're supposed to create a drama about hormone-crazed, belly-button-gazing small-town teenagers who talk like they read The New Yorker on a regular basis. While our showrunner's only experience is writing a horror film that's not a horror film. This show is the Titanic, and they're aiming for icebergs." He spins and takes the one step needed to get through the door, but instead of exiting, he tips his upper body back into the room, one hand on the molding. "Don't worry, wee ones. The only requirement for working on this baby is to have had a miserable adolescence." After ever so slowly taking our measure, his smile confirms my suspicion that Bryce is 80% reptilian. "Obviously, both of you qualify."
Chapter 2. Culver City, California, July 21st, 1998. High 73 degrees Fahrenheit. Low 67 degrees Fahrenheit. Precipitation 0%. Wind speed 10 miles per hour. George. The second day at my new job goes pretty much the same as the first. Story room meeting where the first hour involves people throwing out ideas that get enthusiastically written on the board. In the second hour, those beloved ideas get ripped to shreds. I guess it's called break story for a reason. After that barrel of fun, we crawl back to our holes with what's left to bang out scripts. Not too different from what I did on the cartoons, I guess. Just twice as long, less hockey, fewer explosions, and 100% more talking about sex. If I were more of a gentleman, I'd offer to switch seats with Tina, but her battle with the side of the desk is just too entertaining. Admittedly, the view I get of her cleavage is part of the fun, but the way she curses the universe is the real draw. If she asks, I'll switch. Otherwise, I'll enjoy the show. After today's meeting, however, she remains on my end. Armed with dry erase markers, she proceeds to write on the whiteboard, talking out loud the entire time. She doesn't seem to mind that I don't contribute. My silence was the thing my latest ex-girlfriend, the one from Kansas, hated the most about me. How I just sit like a lump on the couch while she held up 90% of the conversational burden. What can I say? I'm not chatty. The part of my brain that strings words together moves way slower than it does for everybody else. Weird that you'd want to be a writer then, I could hear you thinking. The written word does arrive eventually, whole paragraphs at a time, but I have to be patient. It'll only come if I'm quiet and take in the world around me while my fingers doodle on a page. Eventually, that doodle becomes a scribble, which evolves into letters and words, and then the sentences just fly out. So while Tina paces back and forth, her hands flying, interrogating the air, I'm soaking it all up. Especially when question marks fly out of her mouth, her eyes, and the top of her head. That's another reason I'm quiet. If I relax my eyes and pay attention, my imagination turns the world into one big cartoon. Maybe it's because I watched too much TV as a kid. Maybe it's my continuing obsession with everything animated, from Schoolhouse Rock to Superman to Sailor Moon. Maybe it's just a glitch in my brain. I don't remember how old I was when this started, but by now it's a daily occurrence. Basically, whenever I visualize something or have an idea, it's animated. Usually in the style of my heroes Tex Avery and Chuck Jones from the cartoon golden age of the 30s and 40s. If only I could draw what I see. I mean, I'm good enough for Pictionary, but nowhere near good enough of an artist to do it professionally. At least this quirk of my imagination helps me write stories. I don't tell people about how I see in cartoon anymore. The psychologist my parents dragged me to kind of freaked my parents out, asking pointedly if there were problems at home or if I'd had an extremely high fever at some point. Looking back, I really don't get what the big deal was. Other kids had imaginary friends. All I do is see a better version of the world on occasion, one that's more fun. In any case, after much poking and prodding, both literal and figurative, the shrink told my parents I'd grow out of it, so I just lied and pretended that was the case to make them all feel better. Truthfully, I'd be sad if it stopped, even if it can be a little distracting at times. Like now. As Tina spews ideas into the air and fills the whiteboard with color, animated heads of Lawson's Reach cast pop up around her. They nod and smile or frown and pout in response to Tina's plot ideas and motivation questions. Contrary to popular belief, aka that of every former girlfriend, I do listen. So when Tina draws a square on the board at the same time that I draw a triangle on my pad of paper, words pop out of my mouth. That's it. I must have yelled because Tina lets loose with that squeal of hers. The marker goes flying and she loses her balance. As I'm thinking, why do women wear shoes that are so unstable as she falls through space in slow-mo, my body is the only thing moving in real time. While my frontal lobe spins, man, I wish I could draw this, my caveman brain launches me through space. Next thing I know, she's in my arms and we're staring at each other. For one long moment, I'm Pepe Le Pew and she's the black and white cat. But before I can spring around the room on four paws or kiss her silly, lightning flashes in her walnut-brown irises, threatening to burn us both to the ground. She doesn't slink out of my arms like the cat would. Instead, she yells, "What are you doing?" The swell of romantic background music ends abruptly with a record scratch, and I set her on her own two unreliable, I feel I need to add, feet. Once I'm sure she's not going to fall over again, I step back, hands up. The room is so small I can't go far, so I try to come up with some words to explain. Or apologize, or at the very least, quench the fire still blazing in her eyes. I'm sorry I startled you, and that I grabbed you. I had an idea. Grabbing my pad, I hold it up and point to what I drew. Are we having a geometry lesson? Her eyes ping back and forth from her square to my triangle for a few moments. Because I suck at math. Yeah, well, I suck at writing angsty teenagers, but even I know that a love square isn't a thing. You have to have a love triangle. Her eyes narrow like she's working up a retort, but then a light bulb appears over her head. Again, when I say these things, please understand that I know they're not real, but they're kind of like 65% real to me, so just go with it, okay? Light bulb flashing, her big eyes get bigger, and her fire engine red lips open into a big O. Then she punches me. Hard. Rubbing my bicep, I wince. Ow! Why'd you do that? Because you figured it out, you big lug. She grabs another marker to write in a different color. I thought you weren't listening at all, but that's it. Of course, they had to bring the creepy teacher in to seduce Parker so they could make the love triangle between Lawson and the two girls work. She steps back, staring at the triangle she drew over the square, which sort of makes a star shape, tapping her chin with the marker. Problem is, she's tapping with the open end. You're... Without thinking, I grab her hand and take away the pen before she can make another dot on her chin. I may be terrible with women, but no one wants to walk around their first day at work with a green goatee. The moment I touch her, the light bulb shatters. Pieces tinkle to the floor and she whirls to face me. Why do you keep touching me? I hold up the marker in self-defense. You were drawing on yourself. She melts into a puddle of goo on the floor. Oh my God. Again? She moans. I'm such a dweeb. You think you're a dweeb? Shaking my head, I point to my chest. I'm a full-on, full-time geek. At least you're not a total airhead. I am, however, a complete dork. Dingus, grind, wonk, Poindexter, fart knocker. Okay, I get the picture. Popping back into her original, much more attractive shape and stopping what was a surprisingly long verbal rant for me, she holds out her hand for the marker. We are a pair. This declaration has a part of me I don't see too often leaping out of my body to tap dance around the room. Not the one in my pants. My heart. While I stuff it back where it belongs, she continues. So, how do we solve this mathematical quandary, partner? Tap dancer pitter-patters inside my chest, so I cross my arms over it just in case it tries to escape again. Partner? Hands on hips, she does that little head shake people do when you're being thick. Duh. It's obvious that we work together well. If we have to share this broom closet, we may as well take advantage of it. She picks up a red marker. As she writes the word teacher, she says, Let's figure out a way to write this creep off the show. Wagging the pen in my direction, she continues, They may think that hooking her up with a teenager makes a feminist statement or something, but I say it's illegal. Not to mention gross. Exactly. She stares at the whiteboard, now decorated with words in many colors. So, let's fix it. This time, while she yammers and writes, I settle on top of the desk with my notebook to doodle. I even offer up a word or two. Thing is, when I look down at the page, I've drawn her.
Chapter 3. Wallington, North Carolina, July 24th, 1998. High, 98 degrees Fahrenheit. Low, 79 degrees Fahrenheit. Precipitation, 62%. Wind speed, 20 miles per hour. Tina. I hate flying. I love to go to new places, but I hate being stuck in a tube under the control of a couple of guys who'd choose to spend their days being shot out of a cannon. I hate to complain, because not only did the studio travel agent send an actual limo to pick me up this morning, she put us in first class. Nevertheless, my inner nervous Nellie just keeps reminding me that when a plane crashes, people in first class are just as likely to die as the people sitting in the back by the stinky toilets. What I don't hate, surprisingly, is my new partner's minimalist style of conversation. Right now, he's silently staring out the window. I don't think it's because he's trying to get away from me. There's likely something out there that fascinates him. Maybe he's making up dialogue for the guys working on the tarmac. I do that sometimes. Best of all, he doesn't seem to mind when my mouth has the runs. I not only need to talk problems out, I vomit words when I'm nervous. Right now, a monologue about the ridiculousness of spending money to fly us all the way across the country just to see the location in person is hitting its apex when George rests his arm on the barrier between our seats, palm up. I don't even know what I was saying when this happens. I'm not sure if my words continue or falter, but I take the invitation. I'm afraid, and I need human contact to help me calm down, so I place my hand in his. His palm is dry and warm, and his fingers wrap my hand in comfort. I can finally take a deep breath. Thank you, I whisper. For the first time, I notice what a pretty color his eyes are. How had I missed that bright blue? Or how intense his gaze can be? Like he's reading my aura or something. Would you like something to drink? The appearance of the stewardess has us flinching away from each other. My cheeks are hot as I take in everything but George's face. Instead of placing an order, I blurt, When did we take off? About 10 minutes ago. The woman's smile is patient and possibly amused. You think about what you want, and I'll be back in a moment. Think about what I want. Indeed.
George. My mom is aerophobic, so I recognize Tina's symptoms. Anyway, who wouldn't offer a hand to a coworker in need? Me. That's who. I never hold hands with people. I can't help the thought bubbles and other Looney Tunes effects my imagination creates whenever I observe a person closely, but it still feels like I'm snooping. Hand-holding takes it to a whole new level, so I avoid it. Number 44 on the list my Kansas ex drew up of things that drove her crazy about me. Holding Tina's hand was different. Not only did she visibly relax, I did too. I morphed from the Tasmanian devil to Cecil the turtle. I even missed takeoff. I love everything about flying, but that moment where the plane defies gravity never gets old. I even dreamed of being a pilot, but my vision is too poor. Instead of enjoying the rush of liftoff this time, however, I found myself diving deep into the chocolate pools of Tina's eyes. Unfortunately, after the stewardess brought us drinks, a "We're closed" sign got yanked down and the lights went out in Tina's expression. I guess I might have stepped over a line. I was wondering what it'd be like to kiss her, to take that pouty lower lip between my teeth and... Yeah, no. I need to shut that down. Can't afford a breakup with her because there'd be nowhere to fit the inevitable elephant of awkwardness in that already cramped office. And we would break up. It never fails. Every girl I've dated has invariably tread the path from bewitched to embittered. Week 1, it's sexy that I'm so contemplative and mysterious, as ex number 3 called it. By week 2, I'm broody and ponderous, and somewhere at the end of week 3, I'm full-out morose and sullen. It's not that I change. The things they're attracted to always end up being the things that drive them crazy. Apparently, I'm only fun in small doses. Tina already gets a full day's worth of me. No need to add extra time to that. Self-lecture over and done with, I spend the bulk of the flight working on adding flesh to the bones of the outline for our first episode. Luckily, I like the jumping-off point and the landing, while she likes the messy middle, which makes us perfect together. As co-writers. So just calm the heck down, George, and be grateful for what you've got. A mostly functional work partnership.
Tina. By the time we land in Wallington, I've become a big fan of first class. Turns out, champagne does make everything better. Still, I can't quite believe it when we deplane and someone's waiting for us with our names printed on a sign. It's not even the fact that we get to avoid all the bother of dragging suitcases to a shuttle and waiting in line for a rental car and navigating a new place with a map that inevitably leaves out important details. There's something about having someone being paid to pick you up at the airport that says you've made it. I am a little bit confused, however, because the person holding up the sign that says Tina Fiorentino and George Bronson isn't a man in a suit and black cap. It's a woman in cutoffs and a tank top. I mean, I can see why she'd wear the outfit, with long legs, a slim build, perfect tan, prominent cheekbones, and jet black hair. She's breathtakingly beautiful. Hi, I'm Tina, I say with a wave before pointing to my partner's back as he swerves toward baggage claim. That was George. I'm Danny. She tips her head to the left. If you need the facilities, they're right over there, or we can head over to wait for the bags. It'll be a while because of the lightning. After I let her know I'm all set, we walk together to meet up with George. Are you an actress on the show? Her smile is wide and perfect enough for screens big and small, but she shakes her head. Nah, I could never do that. I've always been a behind-the-scenes kind of person. I appreciate you picking us up, I say, wondering what exactly her role is on the production. Happy to do it. We don't have a lot of taxicabs here, and I figured we'd check out a few locations on the way to your hotel and maybe stop by the set. Her charming accent is neither hillbilly nor Scarlett O'Hara, but mellow and musical. With the weather, we won't get a good sunset, so I think we'll leave downtown for tomorrow. By the time our bags come, the storm that made our landing even scarier than usual seems to have passed over, but Danny frowns at the sky as we walk to her car. It's early in the season for a hurricane, so I hope this one peters out before it gets here. Hurricane? George asks. This is the first word he's uttered since muttering his name when Danny introduced herself. I'm pretending not to be happy that he seems unfazed by Danny's physical charms. He's busy taking in every detail of our surroundings, which is what we're here for, I remind myself. As she drives, Danny says some nasty things about a woman named Beverly and how the producers are panicking because she's screwing with the shooting schedule. It's not until George chimes in that I get that Beverly is the name of the hurricane. I'm too distracted by what's in front of me to focus on the potential disruption of a storm anyway. As we drive through quaint neighborhoods with beautiful homes that scream Americana, I get why it's worth it to bring a whole cast and crew here. And when we drive over a bridge and are treated to a gorgeous pink sky and the shadows of sailboats bobbing on the water, I'm completely sold. This place is one of a kind. I can't believe it's my job to be a tourist in it.
George. We've been up since before dawn LA time, so even though it's inspiring to get a first tour of the locations and exciting to visit the set, when Danny catches my third yawn, she hustles us back to her car. As she pulls out of the parking lot filled with everything from a giant tent to trailers to porta potties, Danny explains that our hotel is also on this barrier island called Wrightsford Beach. A lot of filming happens down here, and we have a good relationship with the rum runner. After we've checked in and arranged to meet Danny in the morning, my stomach growls grow more insistent. As Tina and I pull our suitcases down the hall to our adjoining rooms, I say, I'm gonna grab some dinner after I drop my stuff. Sounds good. I'll probably do the same. She smiles, but something's off. Ever since that moment on the plane, she's had a force field around her that's got me pretty confused. Between it, her wavy red hair, her curvy body, and the magnetic pull she has on me, it's like she's the Scarlet Witch and I'm Vision. Reminding myself that things didn't go so well for the droid in that relationship, I don't knock on her door when I head downstairs again. Between the dim lighting and the preponderance of pirate decor, I don't notice until she hands me a menu that today's tour guide is now working behind the bar. Danny? What are you doing? Handling the cocktail shaker like a pro and pouring a martini into a chilled glass, she give me an isn't it obvious brow raise before delivering the drink to a woman at the other end of the bar. When she returns, I have to ask, so how many jobs do you have? Laughing, she counts off on her fingers for a moment before giving up. Too many to count, but I'm just subbing tonight. I stopped by to say hi and the manager begged me to stay because he's so short-handed. They gave me my first job back in high school, so I can never say no when they need extra help. Anyway, what can I get you? After a quick look at the menu, I say, I'll have a Heineken and a burger. No onions. Is Tina coming down for dinner? I'm not sure. Maybe. She sets a coaster and my beer in front of me. I'll go ahead and put yours in. Tina never does show, and by the end of my meal, I convince myself that it's for the best. But as I lie in my bed, my brain ever so unhelpfully conjures up images of her asleep on the other side of the wall. For once, the vision isn't in cartoon. It's all too real and all too tempting. I'll need to erect my own force field to avoid acting on the desire that Tina has ignited in me. But I'm not sure if I have that kind of superpower.
Chapter 4. Wallington, North Carolina. July 25th, 1998. High, 82 degrees Fahrenheit. Low, 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Precipitation, 20%. Wind speed, 65 miles per hour. Tina. The next day, I somehow get off on the wrong foot with George. Maybe he's mad because I didn't join him at the bar for dinner, even though I explained that I fell asleep after making a bunch of notes. He's all chummy with Danny, though. sitting in the front seat with her, getting her to talk about the town, her history and its history, which is fine. We're here to work, so I take notes as we drive from location to location. And this is the creek that gives your series its name, Danny says as we drive over a bridge. This has me sitting forward so I can see what she's talking about. I thought Lawson's Reach referred to the main character's drive to be famous or get laid. George finishes my sentence with a smile that has me thinking about getting, no. Stop thinking about that. Down, girl. I don't claim to know why they chose the title, Danny says, pulling the car over to the side of the road and putting it in park. I'm just telling y'all that this is Lawson's Reach. It's amazing how many different looks this town has. The beach scene out my window this morning was as pretty as any in California, with a wide expanse of white sand and sea oat-covered dunes. A flock of pelicans even flew by. This body of water is wilder, rougher, bordered by thick pine forests on either side. The creek winds its way through patches of reeds. Long, weathered docks extend over the water. A giant white bird perches on one pier. An old rowboat is tied to another. When Danny pulls out onto the road again, something clicks, and a scene in the pilot presentation of our show flashes in my mind. One of the main female characters rows up to a dock, ties up her boat, and then runs across a lawn to the house of a main male character. Oh, so does the word reach mean creek? Eyes on the road, Danny nods. We've got so many little waterways around here. I guess they had to come up with extra words to describe them. There's the ocean and the river and the intercoastal, of course, but you've also got channels and courses, streams and sluices, runs and rills and races, and reaches? I ask. Yup, she says. A bit later, we park in what Danny tells us is the downtown. The emphasis should definitely be on the town part of the word. I think Wallington is officially a city, but it's nothing like LA or New York. There isn't a building taller than a few stories. There's no traffic, and there are cobblestone streets for Pete's sake. There are also quite a few boarded-up shops, making me think it needs an influx of cash from Hollywood. But as Danny explains, an empty storefront makes an excellent location. It's essentially a blank slate. The rent is cheap, and the neighbors are happy to have something going on rather than a black hole that invites vandals. Who is the location scout? I ask. I mean, I don't know anything about the job, but he's found some pretty cool spots. He is me, Danny says. Man, how many jobs do you have? I ask, feeling like an idiot for assuming that she's just a driver, and that the scout would be a man. George tips a head in her direction. Too many to count, is what I hear. When she blushes slightly, God help me, I want to stab her. She just smiles enigmatically and takes my elbow to steer me towards a video store that she explains is a set. As she pulls out a heavy set of keys, she explains that she shadowed a locations guy from LA a few years ago, and since then has either done the scouting herself or worked as the local coordinator. My family's been here forever, so I know all the hidden places. After she steps inside to turn on the lights, George holds the door for me. When his hand touches my lower back briefly to usher me inside, it's clear that I need to get my shit together. I can't be mooning over my writing partner, so I fire up the willpower to tell my sex-starved self to settle the heck down. I broke it off with my last boyfriend when I decided to take this job. Funnily enough, while I really miss the friends I left behind in New York, I don't miss him at all. Los Angeles is full of cute guys, and I look forward to doing some casual dating. But my career is my priority right now. What I do not want is to be the girl who sleeps around with colleagues. Nobody takes that girl seriously.
George. Tina dodges me one way or another all day, at times even flinching away from the most innocent of touches. I'm not sure what I did wrong, but I hate the frown on her beautiful face more than I hated presenting a book report in elementary school. And I hated that a lot. Still, we need to get a bit more work done tonight. And apparently we have to pack as well. The hurricane isn't predicted to hit us directly, but after she dropped us off, Danny found me in the bar and suggested that we be ready to move just in case. Tina had hightailed it out of the car and then didn't join me for dinner, so I stopped by her room on the way back to give her the news. At first, there's no answer to my knock. When I try a second time, I say, "Tina, it's George." Just as I'm picturing an empty void on the other side of the door, Tina and all its contents being sucked out the window by an alien ship, I hear a heavy thump and some swearing. You okay?" I ask. Another thump. "Do you need help?" I call a bit louder. "I'm fine," Tina yells from the other side. "Nothing to see here." I resist the urge to knock my head against the door. What on earth have I done to make her so uncomfortable? Blowing out my own discomfort, I forge ahead. "I need to give you some information about the hurricane." Seconds later, her door opens. Her hair's in a messy bun and her face is free of makeup. The hotel robe snuggling her curves is wrapping paper that I want to rip off. Seriously, it's sprouted little Christmas trees. This gift under my tree would be the best present ever. "George?" "Yeah, she, Rubbing the back of my head, I wonder if desire punched a hole in my skull and pushed out the other brain functions, leaving me even more incapable of speech than usual. Tina fills the void. "You said you had news about the hurricane?" The impatience in her voice knocks words out of my mouth. "Right. Danielle said we should get packed up in case we need to evacuate in the morning." "Danny?" Her eyes narrow. "When?" "In the morning," I repeat, wondering if her brain function is impaired as well. I do resist checking the floor for a puddle of gray matter, however. "No." With a quick shake of her head, she clarifies. "When did you see Danny? Or should I say, Danielle?" "At dinner." "You had dinner with her?" Her sharp tone materializes as little knives aimed at my chest, so realistic that I can't help taking a step back. No. I mean, I ate. She made drinks." "Nice." Lips that tempted moments ago pressed together in a disapproving line. "Way to make inroads with the locals. Sleeping with the locations person." When she crosses her arms, the gesture serves up her breasts on a tempting platter. Despite her anger, or maybe because of it, any rational thought I can muster is a sheep heading right for the mouth of the big, bad wolf of lust. After I whap that bad boy on the snout, it occurs to me that Tina probably hasn't been to the bar downstairs at all, so she doesn't know that Danny works there, giving her reason to believe that I took her out on a date. Still, I'm pissed that she'd assume the worst of me, so I mirror her, shoring up my own walls of defense. Carefully tamping down all feeling, I tell her, "One of hard-working Danny's many jobs is to tend bar at this hotel. I have chatted with her there while I ate dinner the past 2 evenings, but I have not slept with her. Not that it's any of your business. Now, I'm going to go and pack up as she suggested, and then I'm going to work on writing the beginning and end of the episode as we discussed. Good night." After concluding an impressively lengthy speech for the likes of me, a giant claw descends from the ceiling, picks me up by the scruff of the neck, and forcibly removes me from what has become a very dangerous situation. Not the impending hurricane, not my own randy imagination. No, the danger lies in the reality that is this woman and what she does to me and all my parts. To my dick, to my brain, and, if I'm honest, the most neglected piece of me. My heart. Time for a cold shower.
Chapter 5. Wallington, North Carolina. July 27th, 1998. High, 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Low, 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Precipitation, 100%. Wind speed, 110 miles per hour. Tina. After I close the door in George's face, I debate whether to finish typing up my notes describing the locations we visited today before or after repacking my bags. But when the lights flicker, I figure I'd better get my things together while I have light. Anyway, I'm too mad to concentrate on describing pretty scenery. Mad at George for being so damn sexy under that broody exterior. Mad at Danny for being so gorgeous and nice. Mad at the show for giving me a partner that I'm attracted to. Mad at this hurricane for screwing with my very first work trip. Anger makes me move fast, at least, so I've got everything ready to go in record time. But just as I'm sitting back down at the desk to get some work done, there's a knock at the door. Irritated that George can't just leave me the fuck alone, I stomp over and greet him with a, "What?" that may have been a bit louder than necessary. It isn't George on the other side of the door, however. It's the male equivalent of Danny. Fit body, tan face, blinding white teeth. He's a tall drink of water if I ever saw one. "Sorry to bother you," he drawls, the charming local accent at odds with the urgency in his expression. "But we've got orders to evacuate the island." He hands me a sheet of paper and a map. "I'll help you get your bags to your car." But I don't have a car. His eyebrows come together. "How'd you get here?" "Danny brought us." His lips purse momentarily, then he slaps his head with his palm like he just remembered he could have had a V8. "Are you with the TV show?" "Yes, me and the guy in the room next door." He nods. "Right. I'm supposed to drive you to an inn downtown. Sorry, I've been talking to so many people I got confused. I'll take that map back, and after I get everyone organized, I'll drive y'all over there."
George. Danny's friend Ford has to backtrack multiple times to get us off the barrier island. I guess the hurricane is moving in faster than expected because we keep running into flash flooding from the storm surge. At one point, he throws the car into park, jumps out, superhero cape streaming, to stop the car in front of us before they attempt to drive through a wash. After pointing them in a different direction, he hops back into the car. Soaking wet t-shirt clinging to perfect pecs and biceps, he explains, "People can drown trying to get through a flooded street. Couldn't let that happen right in front of me." I make up silly stories. He is literally saving lives. No wonder Tina's looking at him like he invented chocolate. Rippling muscles, blonde surfer hair, and a jaw so square and strong that anyone, not just me, could picture him cracking nuts with it. All the women back at the hotel swooned when he picked up like 12 bags at a time. Who'd blame her for drooling over him? I don't know what I was thinking. With guys like that in the world, she'd never be interested in a skinny goof like me. The giant green beast growling in my jealous heart crumbles into a pile of forgotten dust when we finally make it to the bridge, however. Yesterday, the intracoastal waterway was a mild-mannered little thing. Now, Ford's having to work so hard to keep the wind from blowing us off the bridge that his forearms bulge with exertion, while the swells below us batter sandbagged doorways and shuttered windows. I swear one wave sends a menacing glare right at me. Eye of the storm indeed. "Why didn't they evacuate us sooner?" Tina shouts over the roar of the wind buffeting the truck, her eyes lit with the same wonder and horror I'm feeling. "Beverly was sneaky," Ford says, seemingly unfazed by the traffic lights dancing crazily in the wind. As we pass underneath them, I can't stop myself from flinching away from the windshield, but he just drawls on. "Weatherman thought she was moving east, but she faked him out and took a hard left turn. Right at us." Ford steers us off the island and toward downtown, but we haven't escaped the storm. Random objects hurtle through the air, and Ford has to dodge them as well as downed tree limbs. I'm grateful for all he's doing to save us from the hurricane's wrath, but every heroic act makes me feel more useless. By the time he parks in front of a restored Victorian home, the howl of envy in my chest drowns out that of the wind outside the pickup. Because in any battle between Ford and me, I'll always be Daffy and he'll be whoever gives the damn duck his comeuppance.
Tina. George's frown turns upside down when Ford introduces us to Violet, who ushers us inside the stately inn. But when she explains that she only has one room and it only has a queen-size bed, that smile flips back over again. "I'm so sorry, y'all, but this is the best we can do." Violet apologizes. "I thought more guests would evacuate, but Beverly has been so unpredictable that people just decided to stay put." George clears his throat. "I'm sorry, but are you an actress?" Seeming as surprised by the non sequitur as I am, Violet shakes her head. "Not really. I studied it in college, but—" "I swear I've seen you on TV," George insists. And then I recognize her. "Oh my God, you're the stump grinder girl." Violet groans, saving me from myself. "Is that thing running already?" "I think I've seen it 20 times since we got here," George says. "What is stump grinding?" I can't help but ask. Violet rolls her eyes. "That was a commercial I shot for my uncle's tree service, like 10 years ago when I was in college. They trot it out every time there's a hurricane because, well, when trees come down, they need everything from trimming to grinding, y'all," Ford says, pitching his voice high and leaning heavily into a southern accent as he mimes taking off a helmet and shaking his hair free, just like Violet does in the commercial. Violet swats at him. "Well, if the power goes out, you won't have to see me on TV again." It suddenly occurs to me that if the storm is worsening by the minute, Ford might be stuck here too. "Wait, where are you going to stay, Ford?" A look passes between Violet and Ford before he shrugs. "Guess I'm bunking with Vi here." It's not my business, but that rarely stops me from sticking my curious nose in. "So you two—" I draw a line between our host and our rescuer. "Are a couple?" Violet barks out a laugh. "Nah, we're just friends. We've shared beds since we were kids." "Weird," George says. "That's in the pilot of the show we're working on." Ford scratches at the 5 o'clock shadow along his jaw. "That's what happens when your older brother's best friend hits it big in Hollywood. Anything and everything is ripe for the picking. But in real life," he pokes at Violet, but she dodges away before he can connect. "She's more like my sister than my real sister, and it's not like we make a habit of sharing a bed." Hip-checking him, Violet adds, "Anymore." "Right. But when nature gives us little choice," Ford shrugs as if that settles the matter. "Speaking of Mother Nature, let's get y'all settled before the lights go out," Violet says, gesturing at the staircase. George's brow furrows. "I thought the hurricane already happened. What we just drove through was—" "No sirree, Bob. She's just getting started." Ford blows out a whistle. "We can expect to get a lot more wind and rain. It's just that in this part of town, we don't have to worry about flooding." "As much," Violet clarifies. "Hopefully, it'll just be really loud. But we'll almost definitely lose power. I'll find a flashlight for you." Tipping her head toward the ceiling, she says, "Ford, they're in 6. Once we get our things upstairs, Violet leaves us with the flashlight and more apologies, but I'm the only one assuring her that we'll be fine. George is silent until the door closes behind them. Hand up, he announces, "Let me just change into dry clothes, and then I'll find a couch to sleep on downstairs," before disappearing into the adjoining bathroom. When he returns, I throw out a lifeline. "Listen, it's not like we're going to get any sleep with that wind howling out there." He just holds out a hand for the flashlight. "I left my wet clothes hanging in there. Hope that's okay." Hands on hips, I sputter. "I think if Hunky Ford and Sexy Vi can share a bed without getting it on, we can too." He just groans. "Seriously, am I so repulsive that you can't even be in the same room as me? Is it B.O.? It is a lot more humid here, and I'm sweating like a—" Before I can get the word pig out, he covers my mouth with his. I pull away, gasping, but only for a fraction of a second. There's a glint in his eye. and my body tells me it's not the reflection of the streetlight through the window. So I grab him by the shirt and pull him back in for another taste. At first, he stiffens, and not in the right places, but when my tongue dips between his lips, he grasps the back of my skull, tips my head to the side, and dives in. Strong fingers tug at my curls. A brush from an articulate tongue sends shivers down my spine. Rough lips scrape across my jaw and neck. But when my hips press into his, he stumbles back, breaking the kiss, and raising his hands in the air, he shakes his head. That's why. Lust zinging from toes to nose blows every one of my circuits. Why? What? Eyes on the floor, he grinds out, "Why I can't stay in this room with you." Before I can step closer to kiss the mulish expression off his face, an unearthly wail stops me in my tracks. I may have forgotten about Beverly, but she hasn't forgotten about us. When something smacks the building with a resounding crash, I dive into his arms instead. Strong hands grasp my upper arms, and concern replaces the desire in George's eyes. I'm fine, I reassure him. That just scared the shit out of me. We should get away from the windows. After a brief scan of the room, he grabs cushions from a love seat and heads for the bathroom. The next crash spurs me into action. Laptops. Right. After I locate the little box that holds every word I've ever written, George hands me his so he can arrange the cushions. Just as I'm lowering my butt onto one, another loud crack sounds. A heartbeat later, the lights go out. A hand fumbles into my arm, and George asks, "You okay?" "Yeah," I answer, the tremble in my voice claiming otherwise. "But do you think we're safe in here?" "I hope so." It's quieter in the bathroom, thankfully, and after a few minutes of deep breathing, I find I need to get something off my chest. "Listen, George, I need to apologize. If we're going to die tonight, I don't want to give St. Peter any additional reasons to not let me into heaven." Wincing, I spit it out. "I was shitty to you earlier. I'm sorry I accused you of sleeping with Danny." "She's just so beautiful." "So are you," he says to the floor. At least, I think that's what he says because Beverly's doing her best to drown him out. When he doesn't say anything else, my mouth fills the void as usual. "You don't have to try and make me feel better about my appearance. I'm at peace with the fact that I'll never be a bikini model." His head pops up, and his eyes flash in the candlelight. I beg to differ. At the risk of covering his face with his large hands, he growls something that sounds like, "Don't do it." My hand fumbles its way to his surprisingly muscular forearm. "Don't do what?" "Talk to you about this," he grits out. A crash from the other side of the bathroom door ramps up my heart rate. Again. After a few deep breaths, I manage, even if it helps me deal with my very real fear that I'm going to die tonight. When George takes my hand, I'm reminded of the fiery kiss we shared before we were so rudely interrupted. Before I can talk myself out of it, I say, "Kiss me again." I feel him shift, but instead of his lips getting closer to mine, the flashlight flicks on. Taking it from him, I shine it on my face. I want more kissing. "Are you sure it's a good idea?" I stop his excuses with my mouth, not with words this time, but lip to lip. When his clam up, I add words. "It may be a bad idea, but also, we could die tonight. I haven't gotten laid in months, and that was the best kiss I've had in, I don't even know how long, so I'd really like to see what else you got, mister." "I get what you—" A howl from outside interrupts him, giving me the chance to make a final plea. "If I'm going to die tonight, I want to at least have sex first. I mean, it's been a while." Before I can blink, his lips connect with mine, and next thing I know, the flashlight has rolled across the floor. I've crawled onto his lap, and my tongue has crawled down his throat. I'm so on edge and so turned on that I think I might come from this kiss. Just as I'm grinding into the very large bulge in the front of his very thin sweatpants, something ticks over in my frontal lobe. Someone's yelling my name. George freezes. Fuck. Ignore it, I whisper, squeezing his thighs with mine. Just as my hot little hand slides under his waistband to learn more about his hot and nowhere near little package, the bathroom door opens. You guys! Violet yells. Blinded by her flashlight, we freeze, and she gasps. Oh! Sorry to, wake you, Violet says. But we just got a tornado warning on the transistor radio. Ha ha! Ha! Hurricanes do tend to make people horny, but I can't leave you here. We have to go to the basement. I'll just step outside to give you some, privacy, but please hurry. After she closes the door, I hear, on second thought, I'll meet you in the lobby.
George. After a terrifying few hours in the dark of the basement, during which I'd swear a freight train drove through the building over our heads, Beverly has finally thrown her last tantrum. I can't imagine what she left in her wake, but I don't have the will to move from the beach chair Violet handed me last night when we stepped into the inn's basement. It's not that I'm comfortable. Every joint in my body aches, but there's a beautiful woman snuggled up next to me using my shoulder for a pillow. Little Z's waft out of her mass of dark curls and float up to the ceiling. Not that I can see them. Even my imagination can't conjure light. I can't remember ever being in a place so deeply dark. When we set up camp in this musty basement, Violet insisted that it was the only place we'd be safe. Unless the 3 floors above us were ripped away and the river rose to record levels, neither of which seems to have happened, but we turned off flashlights hours ago to save batteries. Earlier, Beverly's howls and roars were punctuated by crashes and bashes, making the dark menacing. But now all I hear are the creaks and grunts of half-asleep humans. The house itself is silent. You never really notice how much sound a building makes until it all goes away. Gradually, whispers build around the room. When the whine of a little kid pierces the quiet, Tina stirs, shifts, freezes, and then sits up so fast she clocks my chin with her skull. What the— Ow! George? Her raspy, sexy voice paints a romantic picture for me. Tina rolling over to face me in the cozy queen bed upstairs after a night of lovemaking. Unfortunately, my imagination can't quite muster up a genie to grant the wish. Maybe this is the best I get. After all, the house didn't get ripped or washed away. We're still alive. I guess we lived, she whispers, like she can read my mind. I guess we did. I really need to pee. How do we get out of here? With that, things go from slow-mo to fast-forward. Chairs scrape and flashlights bob as we gather what we grabbed from our rooms last night. Our laptops are safe in a bag next to me, but who knows if the rest of our stuff survived the storm? Or where we'll go next. Without a car or our driver, we'll have to rely on the kindness of strangers.
Chapter 6. Wallington, North Carolina, July 28, 1998. High, 91 degrees Fahrenheit. Low, 77 degrees Fahrenheit. Precipitation, 15%. Wind speed, 10 miles per hour. Tina. Because Danny is omnipresent, the woman who kept me from having sex in a hurricane is also a friend of hers. And because everyone here is so damn nice, when it becomes clear that production will be shut down and that continuing to tour locations is no longer useful because the entire city is a wreck, the guy who got us off the barrier island also offers us a ride to the airport. Thing is, the Wallington airport is closed, so we have to go to the one in Raleigh, which is 2 hours away. I'm so tired, all I can do is nod and smile. Or grimace. I don't think my facial muscles have the ability to lift the corners of my mouth high enough to qualify as an actual smile. Ford loads our bags into the back of his car with the kind of energy I can't imagine mustering. I know I should be grateful that we didn't lose anything, including our lives, But it's just so hot and humid, and I'm hungry, and now George is back to being distant and awkward, and I'm wondering if I dreamed the whole almost had sex thing. But as Ford pulls out of the driveway, all my grumbles shut the hell up. My petty whining dissolves into pure gratitude. We are lucky to be alive. Oh my God, are the only words I can find to describe the destruction laid out before us.
George. It's crazy. Some parts of Wallington were barely touched by the storm. Just a layer of leaves and small branches cover the street. In other spots, it's like a giant stomped through. I could just see him, picking up a tree and smashing it through a roof in one place, kicking a car off the road and flipping it over in another. Meanwhile, Tina's drooling over Ford again like last night never happened. At least the part where we had tongues down each other's throats. "Whatever you need to do," she's saying now, her eyes as big as an anime character's. "We're just grateful to have a ride." Ford groans as we turn a corner to find yet another scene of destruction. "Last night was worse than I thought. I'm going to have to check on a few folks on the way out of town." Doing my best to scrounge up a scrap of manhood, I say, "If you need to drop us off at another hotel or a car rental place, I'm sure we can find our way out of here." Wincing, he glances at me in the rearview mirror. "You could try, but after a storm this big, the airport here in town is likely to be closed for days, maybe a week." "And we couldn't find a rental last night, remember?" Tina says. "I just don't want to put you out, man. I'm headed up there anyway," he shrugs. "I'd rather stay with family in Raleigh who have power than hang around here." Ford's demeanor dims further as we pass a shopping center with more broken windows than intact. "I just want to make sure all of my friends are okay before I go."
Tina. Ford swings by Danny's place to check on her, and my mood improves considerably when she hands out cups of coffee that she thoughtfully brewed the night before and stored in a giant thermos, along with a box of donuts and a gallon of water. The woman is a goddess as far as I'm concerned. Her house has some damage that she wants to stay and attend to, but she asks Ford if he could drive a few more people to Raleigh, her roommates, and an actor named Ben. "Are they ready to go now?" Ford asks, a scowl marring the lines of his classically sculpted face. Danny goes hands on hips like a mom preparing for battle with a teenager. "Ben's here, but you'll have to get Whitney and Sully." "Where are they?" Danny makes a face I can't quite read. "They're at the Kmart." "What are they doing there?" Ford asks, his voice sharp. "They went out last night to get supplies and didn't come back," Danny says. "Just as I was getting worried, Whitney called to say they were locked inside." "Likely story," Ford mutters. Ooh, he's definitely jealous of the guy who spent the night with this girl. Or boy. Southern names are odd. When the actor emerges from her house, I offer to give him the front seat since he's got long legs and a dog. He tries to object, but I insist. Maybe if I spend the ride closer to George, he'll warm back up again. "I appreciate this, man," Ben says as he stows a bag in the trunk. "I came down from Boston for the weekend to look at houses. Now I've got to go back and convince my wife that it's still a good idea to buy a place down here." When I comment on how well-behaved the dog is, Ben explains that his wife trains them. Since my memory is crap, and I love a good character backstory, I pull out a notebook and unabashedly interview him. By the time we get to the Kmart, the stowaways have been released by a confused-looking manager. "What happened to your beard?" Ford asks Sully, who is male. "I shaved it," Whitney says with a giggle. Turns out she's female, and there is definitely some love triangle tension between the three. We reshuffle again. Locals in the front, out-of-towners in the back. I don't mind being snuggled between George and Ben and the dog, but the energy radiating off of George is almost as sharp-edged as the tension buzzing between the trio in the front. It almost doesn't matter, though. The stories in this car! When cute-as-a-button Whitney and strapping young Sully begin to explain how they got locked in the Kmart, I lean forward and ask, "Do you mind if I take notes?" "Notes?" Sully asks, turning to face me. "What for?" "They're writers," Ben says. "On Lawson's Reach. That new show I'm doing." "You mean we might end up on TV?" Whitney asks, swooning into Sully. "Not just working behind the scenes?" The car swerves a bit, and Ford's jaw muscle ticks with suppressed jealousy. Hoping it won't mean we end up in a ditch, I press on. To me, anything and everything is inspiration and fodder. But don't worry, I'll change the names to protect the innocent. "Good to know," Whitney says with a musical laugh. When Sully bites his lip in response, my heart skips a beat. I may not be getting laid anytime soon, but there is nothing like the high of a good story.
George. Tina fills a notebook with tales she coaxes out of our fellow passengers during the drive from Wallington to Raleigh. It's all good stuff, local color that we can definitely use, but mostly I'm grateful that all the attention's on her. With Tina holding court, no one's paying attention to me and the hard-on I've had for the past couple hours. Her scent alone is enough to get my attention, bringing a certain part of me to attention. But now that she's pressed up against my entire right side, I'm basically one big boner. Even so, I managed to take in a few details. For instance, the actor, Ben, I think is his name, used to be an underwear model for Callum Keane. There was also a story about how a dog reconnected him with his long-lost teenage crush, but I was distracted by Tina's curls tickling my bicep as she wrote, so I missed most of the details. We also learned that Danny, Violet, Ford, Sully, and Whitney have all known each other since grade school. They worked together at the Rum Runner during high school and college, but none of them works at the hotel now. Ford was just being a super nice guy as well as a superhero when he executed that evacuation. Instead, they all work in film and television production in one way or another. Ford and Sully record sound, Violet does casting, and Whitney is a hair and makeup person. Tina point-blank asked if any of the five had dated each other. They demurred, but when Ford grilled his friends about their night stuck in the Kmart, Tina got it all down, including the jealousy that steamed out of Ford's ears in a green haze. It's a sweet torture, this ride, and I'm not just talking about the caress of Tina's soft skin. Hearing her banter and watching her animated face as she befriends the locals has a neon red X pulsing in what little space exists between us. She may have been timid the first day on the job, but when she's in her element, she's a social butterfly. Clearly, she'd never put up with an outcast like me. A weirdo who can't talk to people and spends his free time devouring animation to the point that he sees the world in cartoon. Even if I did manage to seduce her when our lives weren't in imminent danger, we'd never last. As writing partners, though, we're clearly well matched. She's great with dialogue, I'm good with creating tension, like I am with everything in real life. By the time Ford drops us off at the airport, the reality check has locked my dick in the male equivalent of a chastity belt, and my brain is on board with the plan to keep her at arm's length because it's obvious that last night was a mistake. If only my heart would get the message.
Chapter 7. Raleigh, North Carolina, July 27th, 1998. High, 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Low, 77 degrees Fahrenheit. Precipitation, 0%. Wind speed, 5 miles per hour. Tina. Naturally, we can't get a flight out of Raleigh. Not to Burbank, not to anywhere. The clerk oh so patiently explains that all flights were grounded for a day, so they're still catching up. Her demeanor polite in that southern way where it sounds like they're being nice, but underneath the treacly tone, you know they're reveling in the fact that they get to torture you. It does make sense. The state is recovering from a Category 3 hurricane. Unfortunately, we waved Ford off after he dropped us at the curb, so he's long gone, faced with a very long taxi line next to a very grumpy travel partner. Things don't look good on any level. Obviously, George has now realized what a mistake it'd be for us to hook up. I mean, we did just ride in very close quarters in Ford's granddad's ginormous car with the sweetest young woman I've ever met. Compared to her, I am chopped liver. Still, no matter what's happening with my sex life, I have work to do. I may not love it, but the path is clear. Work is more important than sex anyway. Right? Listen, I say, startling George from wherever he'd disappeared to inside his busy brain. We need to stay overnight, and it should be close to the airport, so why don't we take the next hotel shuttle that pulls up and get rooms wherever it takes us? That way we can get some food and rest, and maybe even get some work done. George grumbles something, which I take as a yes, and picks up my suitcase. When I try to protest, he ignores me. Moments later, we're on a bus. After a short, silent trip to the hotel, we're greeted by a clone of the airline employee who assures us with a patronizing smile that we are lucky to get a room anywhere in town since the coast emptied itself to the interior. It's a take it or leave it situation, meaning take the room with one queen bed and maybe get some work done, but probably no sleep. Or leave the room, go back to the airport, and maybe get some work done, but definitely no sleep. A quick, resigned shrug from George is all I need, so I slide the corporate credit card over the counter, sign the forms, and take the key. Naturally, there's only one, because why should anything be simple? I need to type up my notes from the car, and I'm starving, so I'm going to find a place to plug in my computer, I say as I hand him the key. If you'll take the bags up to the room, I'll meet you there later, okay? A wounded expression crosses his face, but it's quickly replaced by indifference. And then he's gone. If circumstances were even slightly different, I'd love to get all the way naked with George, have an orgasm, and then nap. But even if that were an option, if I don't transcribe my notes from the past 2 days, my chicken scratch will be useless to me. So I dutifully park myself at a booth in the hotel restaurant, order food, plug in, boot up my laptop, and open a few new documents, one for transcribing my notes, one for character sketches, and one for plot ideas. Before I know it, hours have passed. I don't remember eating, but the plates and cups in front of me are empty, and all my document files are full. Buzzing with ideas I'd love to bounce off someone, I pay the check. It is lovely having a corporate credit card and make my way to our room. When I knock on the door, there's no answer. Restraining myself from using my thick skull to knock harder, I dig out my notebook to check the room number I'd written on the inside cover and conclude that I'm in the right place. While George, apparently, is not. Instantly, my mood takes a dive from a riding high into a deep pool of despair. I'll never have sex again. I hate this place that seemed so charming when we arrived, and George has likely disappeared to file a sexual harassment suit and ask for a new partner. All I want is to click my heels together and be magically transported back to my cute apartment in Los Feliz with my cat, which I pray my roommate is feeding as promised, curl up in my comfortable bed, and get some decent sleep. Rest is the only remedy when I get to this level of fatalism, so I dig a Unisom sleep tab out of my purse, dry swallow it, sit on the carpet I hope someone vacuumed recently, use my briefcase for a pillow, and sink into sleep's sweet oblivion.
George. Tina's example pricks my conscience, so once I find our room, I plug in my own computer. Unfortunately, everything I write devolves into a sex scene. My imagination just keeps providing XXX-rated adventures that a horny teenage audience would love, but that'd never fly in a primetime slot. With my own sperm lining up to jump out of the plane like in that movie Everything You Wanted to Know About Sex But Were Afraid to Ask, I try taking Tony Randall's advice and think about baseball. But it's no use. Since sex with Tina is a losing prospect, I hop into the shower and put the poor guys out of their misery. I even turn the temp to cold afterwards, but it doesn't help much. So I decide to take a nap. When I wake after figuring out where I am, I check the clock. Tina's been gone for hours. I'm also starving, so I decide to suck it up, find her in the dining room, and tell her not to worry. My dick does not control me, so if she regrets our makeout session, I can be a big boy, stuff my feelings away, and work as hard as she apparently does. Work is more important than sex anyway. Right? It takes a few rounds of arguing with Tony Randall and Mission Control to get the team on board with this plan, but I eventually manage to talk them all down. Literally. So by the time I open the door, I'm determined to make things right with my partner. I don't get far, however, because I almost trip over a princess sleeping in the hall.
Tina. When I wake, I'm in someone's arms. For a few precious moments, I don't open my eyes. Instead, I revel in the feeling of being taken care of being held like I'm the most important thing in someone's world. I know it's George, of course, but I don't want to think about everything that's problematic between us or the mixed signals he sends. What's happening in this moment feels so right and good, I choose to listen to the warmth and strength of his arms around me. After he sets me on the bed, I grab his hand. Don't go. He squeezes my hand briefly before setting it on the bed and stepping away. What happened at the inn was a mistake. It's not professional. I don't want to screw up our partnership. He delivers this speech facing the window, so I'm treated to a view of his profile in the waning light. There's a strength, both physical and emotional, that he hides under his habitually hunched spine. Right now, he's standing tall, shoulders thrown back. I can not only see the tension running through him, from fists clenched at his sides to the ticking of his jaw muscles, the source of it echoes in my own body, loud and clear. It tells me I'm right about what he really wants. Shrugging, I do my best to keep my tone light, so I won't scare him back inside his shell. Too late. His attention snaps back to me. What do you mean? I mean, we've already opened the door. May as well get it all out on the table. It's the only way we'll be able to work with each other and create anything real. The fear of dying no longer propels me, but damn the torpedoes. I keep talking anyway. I'm attracted to you, okay? Ever since you held my hand on the plane, I've been a little distracted by it. The bob of his Adam's apple is the only indication I get that I'm on target, but I press on. Okay, maybe a lot distracted. So come on, lay it on me. Are you attracted to me? Or not? His wince has me questioning my empathic abilities. It's not. He shakes his head. This is really embarrassing. Embarrassing? I just admitted that I'm into you. I think I deserve an answer. Head still shaking, he mutters, You're going to think I'm totally cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Aren't we all? I mean, we make up stories for a living. Swallowing past the humiliation that's got a stranglehold on my throat, I add, If you're not into what you see here, that's totally fine. But I think we should be honest about it, so we can both move on and work together. When he keeps shaking his head, I have to face the facts. Either he's too chicken shit to admit he's into me, or I've read things wrong. Exiting is the only appropriate action at this point, so I swing my legs off the bed and head for the door. My attempt is anything but graceful, however, and when I stumble, he catches me. Before I can wrest out of his arms, he blurts, I see in cartoon. Once I manage to find my own 2 feet, he steps away, arms flapping at his sides. There's so much pain radiating off of him that, for once, I don't know what to say. Okay? A rough laugh coughs past his lips. You don't think that's kind of crazy? Well, what do you mean, exactly? Crossing his arms over his chest, eyes on the floor, he talks to it instead of me. Not all the time, but sometimes. Usually when a person is feeling something big, I see their emotions like they're a cartoon. I see myself that way too, sometimes. Like, people turn into cartoons? Not exactly. It's more like, breaking off, he rubs his hands over his face and retreats to the windows. A taut rubber band of hope stretches between us, so I can't help but follow. All I want to know is, are you attracted to me? If you are, I'd like to see where it goes. If you're not, it's fine. I'll deal, and we can work together anyway. When he still doesn't say anything, shame swamps me, telling me that I've totally read him wrong. Or not. I mean, we barely got started here. I'm sure we can get a... He wheels around to interrupt me. The first time I saw you, it was totally auga eyes for me. He's backlit, so I can't read his expression, but the emotion behind his words puts my whole body on high alert, every single cell. You wouldn't even look at me, I whisper. I was afraid that if I did, my eyes would pop out of my head and roll around on the floor. I step closer, needing to know whether he's making fun of me. When I step inside his shadow, the grin on his face is the sexiest thing I've ever seen. Then I'd have to crawl under the desk and try to find them, he continues, his voice as serious as a heart attack. It would have been a whole thing. Now toe-to-toe with him, a winner in this little game of Mother May I press a single finger to his sternum. He goes with it, landing on the bed behind him. After carefully removing his glasses, I set them on the nightstand. Have you always had this, talent? Yep. Nodding, he takes my glasses off and places them next to his, though my parents and a psychologist did their best to quash it. Why? I ask, stepping between his knees and pushing them apart. His gaze drops to my cleavage, and his hands find my waist. It's not normal. I disagree. As my fingertips skim over his biceps, his skin goosebumps under my touch. It's just another way of connecting to people. I mean, I cry when other people are sad. His gaze snaps to meet mine, like Deanna Troi, the empath on Star Trek. All I know is, if there's emotion in a room, I feel it. When his gaze drops to my lips, I add, I think it's what makes me a good writer. Before I can lean in for a taste, he looks away. Well, when a teacher narked on me, my parents sent me to a doctor who told them I needed to spend more time doing physical activity, and I was sentenced to 10 years of playing sports. Horror shudders through me. That's awful. Tell me about it, he says, shaking his head. It was equal amounts of torture for me and the people who had to have me on their team. I sucked at all of them, except table tennis. Like ping pong? No, table tennis. His eyes whip back to mine. It's a completely different thing. Got it. The mix of humor and pathos in his clear blue eyes is an aphrodisiac I'm already addicted to. So, after you picked your eyeballs up off the floor, what happened then? A naughty smile stretches his full lips as he leans back to look me up and down. Do you really want to know? I do, I answer, doing my best to keep my voice steady. You know, it could be good research for the show, to understand exactly how a guy sees a girl, just for research purposes. Desire flashes from his baby blues, obliterating my entire vocabulary. All I can do is nod. Well, once my eyeballs were back in their sockets, it was all about your curves, for starters, he says, his voice as rough as the fingertip trailing across my cheek. Your face is a cornucopia. My eyes drift closed, and all I can do is lean into his touch as it whispers over my skin. Your cheeks are tempting red apples, your brows bananas, and your chin's a perfect plum. Then there's this body. The hunger in his voice has me suddenly breathless with need. Shaking, still robbed of the ability to form words, I give his chest another push. This time he doesn't budge. Hey now, Missy, don't get ahead of yourself. I've got so many other curves to catalog. With surprising ease, he scoops me up in his arms and drops me in the middle of the bed. Then he proceeds to address each and every one of my curves. Even the ones I consider annoying lumps come alive when he whispers and strokes and kisses his way over and around them. I'm still fully dressed, and I'm more turned on than I've ever been. But when I reach for the button at the top of his chinos, he stops my hands. Panting, he says, "Last chance to put on the brakes. This is no longer a test of the emergency broadcast system." Shaking my head, needing to know what comes next more than I need my next breath, I finally find words. This is a story I want to follow all the way to the end. His answer is a delicious, slow kiss that whips my nervous system into a frenzy the way Beverly tossed trees and thrashed power lines. When he breaks the kiss and walks away, an actual whimper comes out of my mouth. It's an effort to blink past the fog of desire he's left me in. But when he returns, the shiny little condom wrapper in his hand is a beacon, and I go for it. "Just a heads up," he says, holding it high in the air. "We'll have to make the ending a good one. I only have one condom." This has me scrubbing my hands over my face with a half laugh, half groan. Only one bed, only one hotel room, only one condom? The universe might be giving us a message. Taking my wrists, he pulls my hands from my face and kisses me on the nose, before leaning back to ask, that we only get one go-round in life, and we should make the most of it? My answer? I unzip my dress and pull it over my head. My reward? Auga eyes actually pop out of George's head when he takes in what's underneath. I mean, I've pictured things in my mind in the past, and I sense what others around me are feeling all the time. But this is like that on steroids. The animated imagery my brain conjures up is fleeting, but so vivid that I can't wait for it to happen again. My response? Let's just say Beverly has nothing on us.
George. Conventional wisdom says that guys fall asleep after sex. Not me. That's the one time I get chatty. In the past, it's been a problem because inevitably I'd relax too much and something weird would get past my inner critic and the girl would regret taking a chance on a bumbling oddball like me. But I told Tina the wackiest thing about me even before we had sex, and she didn't run for the hills. She actually sort of seemed to get it. Now, with her snuggled into my side, she doesn't even blink when I tell her that I'm watching her gorgeous curls grow around us to create a cocoon. When I tell her all the ways I practiced blowing up school bullies in my mind when I was a kid, she adds her own ideas. Every single one of them, just like mine, stolen from a Roadrunner cartoon. But when I confess how supportive my parents are of my career, even though everyone else in my family is either a doctor or an accountant, her mouth turns into a lemon. Nudging her gently, I ask, "What? Your parents aren't excited that you're writing for a big Hollywood TV show?" Her mood shifts and she sits up suddenly. As if that weren't enough, a giant eraser appears in the frame, and she starts scrubbing herself from the picture. Cursing myself for saying the wrong thing, I grab her hand before she disappears, either in my imagination or from the actual bed. "Hey, I get it. It's a risky career choice. Maybe they're just concerned." She flops back into the pillows with a groan. "No, come on, George. Lawson's Reach isn't a big Hollywood show. It's a tiny North Carolina show on a network with actors no one's ever heard of. So far down the dial, no one will ever find it." You know TVs don't have dials anymore, right? Twisting the bedsheet in her hands, she practically growls in response. Now, instead of scrubbing herself away, she's facing a tiger that just leapt out of her chest, flashed its fangs, and roared. "You know what I mean," she says, seeming to push the tiger out of the way before it slashes a paw at her. They're waiting, somewhat impatiently, like it's their biological clock ticking instead of mine, for me to give up, come home, marry my high school boyfriend who manages the local Home Depot, go back to church, and spit out babies. "Hey," I whisper, doing my best to focus less on that high school boyfriend and more on bringing her back to the present. This show will probably go nowhere, but it's a great place for us to learn without anyone looking, to get better at writing so when the big Hollywood opportunity does come, we're ready. Meanwhile, I continue, easing the sheet out of her fists and kissing each finger until the tiger morphs into a house cat. Maybe we should do some research? So we're really, really good at writing sex scenes? She purrs and responds. Here I was thinking we'd have to choose work over sex. The cat switches its tail, in a good way, I think, so I let my lips continue to do the talking. To her body, that is. The rest of me shuts up.
Chapter 8. Culver City, California, July 30th, 1998. High 78 degrees Fahrenheit. Low 62 degrees Fahrenheit. Precipitation 0%. Wind speed 12 miles per hour. Tina. The next morning, it takes me a few minutes to figure out where I am, but eventually memories of the previous night filter into my consciousness. As I recall the many ways in which we'd managed to make each other's bodies very, very happy, even after we used the one condom, there's a smile on my face when I turn over in bed, until I find the other side empty. On my way to the bathroom, while I find evidence that a night of sex with George was not a figment of my active imagination, his belt on the floor, a sock on the lampshade, boxers on the TV, the man himself is nowhere to be found, which might be a good thing, because what I see in the mirror is a little scary. I showered last night at some point, but having sex with wet hair creates a Medusa look that no one would find attractive. So I jump in for a do-over. By the time I've tamed the beast with the hotel hairdryer, my favorite scent greets me. Nectar of the gods, I moan, accepting a cup of piping hot coffee, fixed the way I like it, with cream and 1 1/2 packets of sugar. And the delivery guy is pretty cute, too. George blushes adorably. Found a convenience store across the highway. When he sets donuts, orange juice, and a box of condoms on the desk, I don't even know where to start. What I do know? This man is perfect. When a call to the airline makes it clear that we won't get back to Los Angeles today, and maybe not even tomorrow, neither of us is even the tiniest bit upset. We make the most of it. Half the time is spent making out, half of it making plans for the characters of Lawson's Reach, all of it in bed, punctuated by deliveries from room service. After we land at LAX 2 days later, I let go of George's hand so I can turn my watch back 3 hours. I'm exhausted, and every piece of clothing I'm wearing is wrinkled. But when I take his hand again, there's a goofy smile on his face. And I'd bet it's not just the sex that has him so happy. We've returned with a list of ideas as long as George's arm. Even his talented cock isn't that long. We worked pretty darn hard, folks. Once we arrive at the studio, we don't get a chance to sit down before Bryce stalks into our office and looks us up and down like we're the morning news. Clearing his throat ominously, he slaps a sheet of paper on the whiteboard and pins it in place with a magnet. There's a new policy. No fraternization among co-workers. What does that mean? George asks, interrupting him, his tone sharp. So sharp, I swear little wasps fly out of his mouth. Fraternization? Well, I don't have a dictionary in front of me. I know the meaning of the word, George snorts. I want to know what it means in this context. Like, no socializing with colleagues or just... Bryce shrugs. Don't shit where you eat. Gaze pinging back and forth between us, he adds, meaning, whatever happened in Carolina stays in Carolina. When a little moan of panic escapes from my mouth, his gaze swivels over to me. Is that a problem? No, not at all, I sputter. We need to be especially squeaky clean, he says. When he drops a manuscript on George's desk, I recognize the title of the episode draft we faxed him from the hotel in Raleigh. Since you two did such a good job of getting rid of that Randy teacher before she did the deed with the Parker character, I got the green light to write an episode with 2 boys kissing." Clapping his hands together, he lets out a little squeal. "The first on prime time, and I am determined to make that work. So, we can't have any shenanigans around here." George opens his mouth to speak, but Bryce stops him with a hand in the air. "Or there will be blood. Got it?" George doesn't answer. Instead, steam comes out of his ears. I don't just feel his anger. I see it. In cartoon. If the circumstances were different, I'd be tickled pink, maybe literally. Instead, I squelch all emotion to answer Bryce. "Got it. No problem." He exits the room, but before I can close the door behind him, he pops back in and points at the manuscript on the desk. "I forgot to tell you, there are notes. We'll need your edits by the end of the day. After that, you need to write a hurricane episode. The crew managed to get a bunch of footage of Beverly, so we want to get on that. Also, you need to leave the door open." "I can't get to my desk unless it's closed," I say, doing my best to keep my tone even. "Fine." He flaps a hand dismissively. "Open it again once you've crawled back there." After I edge around the desks to take my seat, George's toys loom large between us. Carefully making space between them, I reach across the desks, palm up. "I need this job, George. I can't afford to quit." He takes my hand, but his eyes seek the window. Little question marks float out of the top of his skull. "I guess I could try and go back to Hanna-Barbera." "I could see if 90210 is hiring," I offer. "Or Party of 5. But we're good together." He slaps his other hand on our script so hard that half of his figurines fall over. The question marks morph into lightning bolts. "This is the best thing I've ever written, even if it's covered in red pen." "Me too," I mutter, easing my hand out of his to flip through our episode's pages. "So, what do we do?" he asks. After we finish fixing this, you mean?" "We're new here. We need to knock their socks off." He holds out a hand. I give him the script instead of my own, and he nods once. "I guess that's where we put our passion, then. Work is more important than sex. Right?" With that thought, all the pretty pictures go away. Still, we have a job to do. The air may have been let out of the balloon we floated in on, but we dig in to read over the notes, argue over possible fixes, and wrestle words onto the page until we're both happy with the changes. I hit print on my laptop and get up to walk down the hall to pick up the copies. As I stare at the pages spitting out of the copier, I do my best to convince myself that our partnership is worth the sacrifice of a potential relationship, but I'm not terribly successful. When I return to our office, pages heavy in my hands, George catches my wrist before I can squeeze past his desk. After taking the copies from me and setting them aside, he takes both of my hands in his. "You know," he begins, his tone quiet and oh so conspiratorial. "Bryce did kind of give us an out." "He did?" His thumbs circling my palms are somehow the sexiest thing ever. He said, and I quote, "Whatever happened in Carolina stays in Carolina." A little devil hops onto my shoulder and claps his tiny red hands in excitement. "So, it could happen again when we're back in Carolina?" His shrug is nonchalant, but his grin is wicked. "I mean, if we can get adjoining rooms again." Me and my devil mirror the shrug and the grin. Only one pair of riders is there at a time, so who's to know? As I casually bump the door closed with my hip, he rolls his chair over to pin me against it. His expression wolfish, he whispers, "Anyway, who has time to date? We're here 10 hours a day." I tip my head to the side and tap a finger on my chin, pretending to consider the idea. "Maybe you need a reminder of what you'd be missing." His voice is quiet, his tone controlled, but when he sweeps all of the action figures off the desk, desire hits me like a hurricane, and a kiss from him is the only thing that'll keep me from drowning. His lips crash into mine, fingers grab onto fabric like they're lifelines. When we come up for air, we're both panting. Okay, deal? This won't be easy, but it's worth it, to me. This time, it's not only lust zinging between us. Heart bubbles float out of his eyes. I wasn't 100% positive about what I was seeing before, but it's now clear as a bell. In fact, an angel hops onto my left shoulder and rings an annoying little bell next to my ear to drive the point home. I, do have a confession to make. Heart bubbles burst, and little pink droplets rain onto his head, rubbing a hand over his face. He sighs. I have a feeling I'm not going to like this. I don't leave him hanging for long. I may have an overactive imagination, but I only use it for good, never evil. Well, the truth is, George, pausing briefly, I knock the angel off my shoulder. She may be right, but I'm not that big of a goody two-shoes. I'm pretty sure I see in cartoon, too. Thank you for listening to What Happens in Carolina, written by Karen Gray, narrated by Bradley Ford and Carly Robbins, both members of SAG-AFTRA. Produced by Home Cooked Books, post-production by Rick Agronic. For the inside scoop on Karen Gray's upcoming releases, sales, and giveaways, be sure to sign up for our newsletter at followkarengray.com. Text copyright 2023 by Karen Gray. Production copyright 2023 by Home Cooked Books, a division of Jasper Productions, LLC.